Thinking styles. We all have thinking biases or shortcuts in our thinking. These will include common, unhelpful, or negative thinking styles. These thinking styles can vary depending on the situation, but we can notice individual habits or tendencies in the way which we think negatively. In CBT, we refer to these preferences as our negative thinking styles. I'm going to go through a few examples of these. It can be really helpful to have a think which of these thinking styles might apply to you. Once you can spot the tendencies which you tend to have as your negative thinking styles, then it means that you can spot what you're doing a little bit quicker and maybe take those thoughts with a bit of a pinch of salt and maybe think what's more an accurate representation of what's going on. Okay, so the first one on the list is the negative filter. This is where we hang on to negative thoughts or information and filter out or let go of the positive ones. The negative thoughts act like Velcro, sticking to us and staying with us, whereas the positive information or feedback we receive slips off a bit like Teflon. This is often a particularly strong tendency in people experiencing depression or low self-esteem, but it is a really common thinking style for a lot of us. Have you ever come out of an exam or job interview, for example, and focused on everything that went badly rather than what went well? Yeah, that's the negative filter. One way to counteract it might be to, when you feel like you're falling into that negative filter trap, to try and identify 3 things that went well first in that situation as you're reflecting on it. Then you could maybe think things that you might do differently next time, but it's a way of trying to get some balance in there. Catastrophizing is the next negative thinking style on the list. So this can be related to worst case scenario thinking. For example, thinking something bad is going to happen. It can range from anything from if I'm late to work, I'll get sacked, to what if the world ends. Useful challenges might be to ask what's most likely to happen, or this hasn't actually happened, we can leave that problem for future me. Magnification or minimization. So we sometimes think of this as mountains and molehills. For example, this task is impossible, or I only got the job because they couldn't find anyone else. The next one is mind reading. So human beings have a tendency to feel that we know what other people might be thinking. So most of the time we make mistakes when we think we're reading other people's minds, and we can jump to the wrong conclusion. For example, we might think, my manager didn't speak to me today, so they must hate me. There's actually no evidence for that. And sometimes it can be helpful to ask ourselves, what's the bigger picture here? Or what information am I missing here? And it's often a case of we just don't know what the situation is there. We don't know what that other person is thinking. All or nothing, or sometimes known as black or white thinking. This is where you have limited ability to compromise with your thoughts. For example, if you think about multiple cars all entering a roundabout at the same time and thinking, I was right to pull out when I did, the other driver was 100% wrong. The next unhelpful thinking style on the list, or negative thinking style on the list, is unrealistic expectations. So that's a tendency to focus on what we did not achieve rather than what we did achieve, and setting targets of being perfect, being the best. Unfortunately, this is something that we do see quite a lot in the caring health professions, and people setting really high, unrealistic expectations for themselves that they wouldn't see for anyone else. Again, a useful strategy for this might be to reflect on situations and, again, ask ourselves 3 things that went well. before we start thinking about things that we might do differently next time. The next unhelpful thinking style on the list we have here is self-blame, also sometimes called personalisation. So this talks about taking ownership of everything, even when those things couldn't be your fault, such as throwing rubbish away in a public bin, someone else then throwing away that rubbish but not properly, and then a little boy falls on that rubbish and you then think it's your fault, even though your rubbish was actually properly in the bin. The next on the list is emotional reasoning. So, if I feel this way, it must be true. For example, my heart is racing, therefore the situation, my brain's telling me it's scary, it must be dangerous, even when that situation might actually be safe. Remember, just because it feels bad doesn't necessarily mean it is bad. So hopefully you can consider those negative thinking styles and which ones tend to be your go-to or habitual thinking styles. And hopefully you can consider some of those challenges to those thinking styles as well when you do spot them occurring in your day-to-day lives. And hopefully that's a skill that you can develop and get better and better at spotting when you're falling into those traps.
There's 37 videos in total looking at different elements of thoughts, feelings, behaviours and physical responses to distress and discomfort. We hope you find some help from them.